Be yourself, change the world. Be yourself and change the world. What's up, everybody? So thank you for listening to the Aaron Hill podcast. And I just wanted to talk for a few minutes about a thought that I had earlier. And it's kind of something that's been a part of a ongoing process. So I'm going to read something first that I put up on Facebook earlier today, a couple hours ago. In my humble opinion, you are the most motivational to others when you're just positively living your life and not trying to be motivational. Authenticity with who you naturally are speaks volumes over the person you suit up to be. This is something I continue to learn every day as I unapologetically display my vulnerability and full confidence to the world. And with each step, I realized there was nothing to ever be afraid of or reluctant for. The highest respect comes to those who unapologetically live their truth, no matter what side of the moral fence they fall on. We are all impacted deeply by the deepest levels of human authenticity because, as a social species, we know the courage it takes to truly be yourself. Aaron Hill. So this is something, this is something that I just put up on Facebook a couple hours ago. And it's something that I thought about after having a great conversation with a good friend of mine as we were talking about some ideas for a new concept, like a new social media show. So you'll be able to, in fact, hear that conversation in a few, because we also did that as well as a podcast to sharing the ideas, even as we just brainstorm on it. So yeah, it's something that I think about that's been a part of my journey for a while, and I continue to learn more and more every day. The people that go down in history on either side of the moral fence are the people who unapologetically live their truth. And I say, people that fall on either side of the fence because the good people, good guys, good gals, bad guys, bad gals, they all go down in history because of that one trait. So, being as though, I'm on the good side, I'm on the side for good, even though that's subjective from person to person, right? But, my goal is always to impact people in a positive way, no matter what I do. All my actions are geared in that direction. So, what I realize from day to day, even as I continue to live out my life in the most honest, vulnerable, not afraid of shit ways, especially, and I'm talking about, when it comes to mainly people, other people's judgment or perspective or criticism, I think that healthy balance of being able to take positive criticism while at the same time, not being overly judgmental of yourself, I think is super important. So when I think about that every day, now I'm to the point as an individual where I look for ways to be vulnerable, because there's power in vulnerability, and every time you do something that is more to the core of who you are and not necessarily trying to, please people, or not trying to cover up even a little bit of who you are because of the fact that you don't feel like people will accept it. I mean, you just grow leaps and bounds, day by day, action by action, moment by moment. And so I think about that, as we were having this conversation, when you hear the In fact, the name of it, when you see it on my podcast, it's going to be called the words "pillow talks" is in the name, and I forgot, I already named it. I forgot what the other part was, but just look for the one that has "pillow talks" in the name. You know, when you listen to that, we're talking about an idea that most people would be like really afraid to do. It's like, you know, a pretty vulnerable thing. And I was thinking about how, for me, like, it just, I'm so excited about things like this, because the more raw, the more real, as my friend Sherry Goodall would say, the more vulnerable, you know, the more just up close and personal for me, the better. Especially when I get a chance to just be in my element and to not switch my tone or tenure, or, you know, or just come any place out of my element, especially the element that I am in, you know, when the cameras aren't looking, you know, the element I'm in, just like when I'm just in my natural groove, like that for me is the most powerful. And I was thinking about how with the conversation, I was so easy to just flow with the idea. I didn't even have any second thoughts about it. And I was like, wow, this is really an interesting thing. But the thing is, there's such power in authenticity. You know, many people, when it comes to like social media, you have some people who don't give a damn what people think, and that's a good thing in some respects, and then not a good thing in other respects, because maybe there are certain parts of them that arguably do really need to change, or they really need to come, you know, from a different perspective. And yeah, they just, no matter what anybody says, you know, and maybe they're being like messy, as people would say, or like just downright rude or insensitive, you know. And then there's people who would show more of themselves. They would be more of themselves, except for they're afraid that, you know, not everybody is going to get it or appreciate it or understand it. And I think that to some degree, all of us are both of those equations. You know, I think about myself. I mean, there's so many things as far as humor that I think I'm going to be doing this year that is like totally, like prior to coming to this level of confidence, you know, I wouldn't have necessarily displayed, because maybe it was like embarrassingly silly, you know, like to the point where I was just like, yeah, nobody's gonna get this, nobody will understand it. But like now I'm to the point where, yeah, none of that matters to me. I actually, it's proven every step of the way that the more real I am, the more raw I am with like who I am, and the things I aspire to, or that I just do naturally or normally, you know, the more impactful it is to people. You know, the more people draw closer to me, the more people are inspired by my journey. You know, to have people every day tell you how inspired they are by your journey, when you're just doing what you would do anyway, but you're just bold enough to be that way no matter who's looking, as well as you're confident enough to share some of the more vulnerable aspects of your life. Now, this is funny, because this is all coming from a person who 10 years ago, like all but demonized reality TV. And I take that back. I can't say demonize it, because first of all, y'all know me, that's not even who I am, that's not even what I believe in. But colloquially speaking, I can't even use that term, because, you know, the one thing that's always been a part of my character, and I remember one of the most influential people in my life, my best friend and bass player Blue, I remember he said it to me. He's like, man, the one thing about you, like he was talking about from earlier in our relationship when we just were getting to know each other, and he would talk to me about things that was like way outside of my league as far as understanding, or at that time, my religious beliefs and that kind of thing. He's like, man, you would never knock something that you didn't understand. Like, you would always just see it in a non-judgmental way, and even if you couldn't attest to it, you would just be like, man, like that's interesting. You know, I can attest to it, but it's super interesting. And I realized at some point that that was the trait that allowed me to really get to the place where I am now, with having so much experience and understanding of different things, because I just never judge things. You know, I always start off with like a neutral place of like, I don't understand, so I can't judge, and that allows me to get in and to learn some things, you know, and have more of a broad palette and perspective of life. So, you know, I just think about that kind of thing, you know, and how, yeah, at this point, it's like I'm helping other people to learn how to be more vulnerable, because the true key to freedom, especially when it comes to social media and these kind of things, is to not be afraid to totally be yourself, especially in the ways where you're coming from a positive perspective, you know, and hopefully, you know, that's all the ways that you're coming from. But, you know, it's the most important thing to do. It's like you never want people to get adjusted or get used to a version of you that's not how you would be when your hair is let down, when you're like totally being yourself. Because then what happens is then people get used to that, and then you have to uphold that kind of image, and that leads to depression and anxiety. That leads to you know, things that are worse. You know, as far as not feeling the worth of life, like that leads to what you call it, like, you know, completely removing yourself from society, whether it's physically or virtually. Like, that's the consequence of that. And one of the things that I'm talking heavily about right now is that in this new age of communication, you know, we've added a whole different branch, a whole different tree of like communication onto our lives that we weren't used to 20, 30, 40 years ago. So that has major positive impacts, and it also has some other major cons that we have to look out for, which is that more people are afraid to fail now, because if they put their success on social media, if they put, you know, their life on social media and it becomes a success, it's, you know, if and when things don't work out or don't go the right way, it's like then people either have to show that too, which most people are afraid of because of the judgment, you know, or they just have to not show that at all, and just continue to pick up where they left off when they can on the polished and positive things going on. And that leads to imposter syndrome. You know, that leads to like feeling that you really are not able to be yourself, you know. And it's different than when you have just a family of people, a family of 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 people that know you, that you know, that know your ups and downs, or know you that personally, and find out. That's different than having thousands of people, you know. That's a kind of pressure that brings on that can bring on anxiety. So I realized that the way around that, the way to conquer that, the way around that, the way to like really not have to deal with that, is to actually be yourself as much of the time as possible, and not your suited up self, you know, not the self that you put on in front of, you know, people that you're trying to either impress or, you know, get their validation, or, you know, get their approval, or whatever the case may be. Because when you do that, you're not doing, first of all, yourself a favor, and then you're not doing other people a favor either, because then it is true that once you get to the point where you don't want to be like that anymore and you just want to be your natural self, then people will go like, well, wait a minute. Then they'll see that as imposter syndrome, because to them, your natural self was this other version that you upheld, that you created, you know, what have you, that maybe served a purpose. But yeah, it's just important to scan our lives. And so now what I do is I look at myself every day, and now I look for ways to be more vulnerable. You know, I look for things in my content, like my video content, where I screw up, or where I trip and fall, or just anything. Like, you know, because for anybody that can attest to this, once you push past a certain fear, then all of a sudden it's like a whole other dimension is open up to you. Like you no longer fear, and so it empowers you. It allows you to do so much more. And then you also realize one other big thing too, which is that you didn't have any reason most of the time. There was no reason to be afraid anyway. You realize that later, like, man, that wasn't even that serious. You know, people didn't even judge me the way that I thought, or they did, but I really don't give a damn. And I was able to say that, and they backed off. Like, you know, just being as authentic as possible, you know, is the key. And so I feel like all the people that we look at in history, the ones whose names go down in history, no matter what it was their name went down for, which is why I use it doesn't matter what side of the moral fence they fall on. The people that have the biggest impact on humanity are the ones that are the most unapologetic about living their truth out in the open for all to see and not giving a damn what anybody else thinks. So my deal is, I always there's a saying that I heard, use your powers for good, right? So my deal is, for all of us that are using our powers for good, let's just keep pushing the envelope as far as giving people the opportunity through various expressions to see who we really are and to accept that that's who we are. Give them the opportunity, and go forward anyway, no matter what they're, because you'll feel so much better. So that's about it. And stay tuned for that podcast. I'll probably put it up in a few hours. I'm on my way to JoJo's. If anybody who is watching this live or listening to this live happens to be in a DC area, we're there every Thursday. I'm there with Clarence Ward the third and Nat Feelgood every Thursday, 7:30 to 11. And tomorrow, I actually hadn't got a chance to send out an email yet for those that are on the email list, but I'll also be putting up a Facebook post tonight. Tomorrow, we have an event down at the UB Blake Center. It's free Fridays, first Fridays at the UB Blake Center. I'll also be there again tomorrow with Clarence Ward the third and Nat Feelgood. And that is from 8. It's 2 events actually. The second event is called The Rue. So we're basically going to do 2 sets. And it's basically from 8 to, we'll probably be there until 11. I would say 11 is around the time. The event goes to 12, but the music will probably be over shortly after 11. So come on out. It's 847 North Howard Street tomorrow night. It's going to be a great time. It's just a 2-drink minimum. And yeah, we're going to have a good time. And then other than that, stay tuned for the information that I put out probably this weekend about my January 24th first ever solo piano concert here in Baltimore. I think you all really appreciate that. So yeah, drop a line with your thoughts to the information that I talked about here, or the opinions or what have you. And as always, be well. Peace.